All right, so ready to dive in?
Always.
Awesome. Today, we're going deep, really deep, into the story of Lemuel Smith.
Ah, Lemuel Smith. Now there's a name that sends shivers down your spine.
You got that right. A name that might not be a household name for everyone listening,
Right.
but his crimes,
Uh,
oh, they left their mark. We're talking serial murder, prison murder, and this whole story even touches on, like, the really early days of forensic science.
yeah, and you know what I think makes Smith's case so fascinating is that it's almost like a snapshot of the criminal justice system at
Oh,
like a crossroads.
ah.
It raises questions about things like parole and how forensic science was used back then, and how we as a society deal with these really extreme
It's like
offenders.
all these issues that we're still grappling with today, right?
Exactly, exactly. It's like looking into a twisted mirror of our own times.
So to try and unravel all of this, we've got Smith's Wikipedia page.
Wikipedia, the rabbit hole of information.
Oh, it is. And this one, it reads like a true crime novel, seriously. So, Lemuel Smith, born 1941, Amsterdam, New York.
Seemingly ordinary beginnings, right?
You'd think so. But even in his childhood, there are these little hints of darkness.
Yeah, like that claim about him trying to smother a young girl when he was just a kid himself.
Oh, yeah, like 11 years old, and he allegedly tried to smother a 9-year-old.
Chilling, right? And even though it's unsubstantiated, meaning there's no real solid proof,
Right.
it still casts this shadow over everything. Makes you wonder what was going on in that young mind.
It's like, were there any warning signs that people just missed or chose to ignore?
Right. And then, boom, 1958, tragedy strikes.
Yeah.
Dorley Water Street, a woman in Smith's neighborhood, she's found murdered.
And guess who's a suspect? 16-year-old Lemuel Smith.
Oh, but here's the thing. They tried to get a confession from him, but they botched it. Let him slip right through their fingers.
Like a dress rehearsal for all the horrors that were to come.
It's almost like he got away with it. And that emboldened him, gave him a sense of invincibility.
Scary thought. But it doesn't end there. He ends up moving to Baltimore.
Another fresh start, right?
You'd think, but nope. Just a year later, he brutally assaults a 25-year-old woman. Luckily, someone intervened, but this time, he gets a 20-year prison sentence.
And that's where we start to see the pattern emerging, right? This escalation of violence, this brutality. It's a huge red flag.
Okay, so now he's in prison. You'd think that's the end of the story, but in 1968, he's paroled. And that's when things take a truly horrifying turn.
Parole. The revolving door of the justice system. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And in Smith's case, well, it was a disaster.
He's back in New York, and within a year, he kidnaps and sexually assaults a woman. She only managed to escape because a couple was passing by and intervened. Seriously, heroes.
That incident, it's a stark reminder of how these crimes affect everyone, not just the immediate victim. The ripple effect of trauma, of fear, it spreads outwards.
Absolutely. And the thing is, on that same day, he kidnaps and rapes another woman. This time, someone connected to his own family. Back to prison he goes, but again, he only serves a fraction of his sentence.
It really makes you question the whole parole system, right? Were they even trying to assess his risk, his potential for reoffending, or were they just, trying to make space?
It's a question that haunts this whole case. And sadly, it doesn't get any better. In 1976, he's paroled yet again.
Third time's the charm. Not this time.
This time, it's like a switch flips.
Yeah.
His crimes become even more frequent, even more brutal.
This is the period where he earns the title of serial killer. The crimes are so gruesome, it's like something out of a nightmare.
All right, let's break this down because it's important to understand just how dark things got. First, there's the double murder of Robert Hederman and Margaret Byron. They owned a store in Albany.
Brutally attacked. And here's a detail, and I warn you, it's disturbing. They found human feces at the crime scene.
Ugh, yeah, that's rough. What does that even mean?
Some experts think it could be a sign of, like, a need to dehumanize the victims.
Okay, so it's more than just a gross detail. It's a psychological thing.
Potentially. A way of asserting power, maybe. But hold on, because it gets worse. Just a month later, Joan Richburg is found raped, murdered, and mutilated in her car at a mall.
This level of violence, it's unfathomable.
And it fits the pattern of escalation. With each crime, the need for stimulation, it grows. The boundaries of depravity get pushed further and further.
Then there's the attempted kidnapping of a young woman and the assault on her grandmother. It almost seems random, desperate.
Right. Like he's not even targeting specific victims anymore. It's just anyone could be next.
And that brings us to the final act before his capture. The murder and mutilation of Mary Wilson.
This one, it shocked even the most seasoned investigators. The level of brutality was just off the charts.
It makes you wonder, what could drive someone to do something like that?
And, that question, it's a question we're still trying to answer. But here's where things take a turn. He gets caught, but not through traditional detective work. It's forensic science, specifically bite mark analysis, that seals his fate.
Bite mark analysis. That's pretty cutting edge for the time.
It was, and it's a story that has a lot of twists and turns. But we'll save that for the next part of our deep dive.
So bite mark analysis, huh? That's got to be like one of the most unique ways to catch a killer.
It is, and it's not without its controversies. Over the years, bite mark evidence has had a kind of bumpy ride in the world of forensics.
I can imagine. I mean, how can you be sure it's really like a specific person's bite?
Right. There have been some miscarriages of justice because of it. People wrongly convicted based on bite mark evidence that turned out to be, well, not so reliable.
So how did it all go down with Smith? Like, how did they even get a bite mark to work with?
Well, you remember his last crime before they taught him was the kidnapping and rape of Marianne Maggio, right?
Yeah, 18 years old. Awful.
Yeah, it was. But thankfully, she survived. And she was able to give the police a description.
Which led to his arrest?
Exactly. But
Wow.
but here's the thing. Arresting him and actually proving he committed all these other murders, those are two different things.
Yeah, you need like solid evidence to connect him to the murders.
Exactly. And that's where the case of Mary Wilson comes in.
The one where they found that disturbing mark on her body.
Yeah, that one. See, during the initial investigation, they noticed a mark that they thought, might be a bite. But to be sure, they had to exhume the body.
Exhume. Wow, that's a big step.
It is. It's not something they do lightly, but they needed to be absolutely certain. So they brought in a what they call a forensic odontologist.
Okay.
A forensic odontologist. It's basically a dentist, but they specialize in dental evidence for criminal cases. And what this odontologist found, well, it was pretty chilling.
What did they find?
The bite mark, it matched Smith's dental impressions, like perfectly.
Okay, so they've got a match, but couldn't the defense still argue that it's just a coincidence?
Oh, they definitely tried. But the prosecution had they had another ace up their sleeve. Remember that detail about the human feces at the Hederman murder scene?
Yeah, we kind of glossed over that a bit.
Yeah.
It's a tough one to stomach.
Yeah, no, I get it. But turns out it might have been more important than anyone realized at first.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the investigators, they had this hunch, right, this theory, that whoever did it, they might have,
Let's just say they had a particular habit.
Yeah, exactly. So they decided to test this theory. They set up this whole experiment at Bleecker Stadium in Albany.
An experiment with what?
They used a police dog, a trained one, of course.
Yeah.
So they put Smith and 4 other guys behind these screens, and then they gave the dog the scent from, the clothing that had been stained at the crime scene.
Hold on, they were trying to like sniff out the suspect based on that.
Yeah, it was a long shot for sure, and honestly, not something that would fly in court today. But back then, well, it was a bold move, and it paid off.
So the dog identified Smith
Multiple times. They even rearranged the guys behind the screens, and the dog kept going back to Smith.
Wow, that's pretty convincing, even if it sounds a little out there.
It was, and along with the bite mark evidence, well, it was enough to get a confession out of Smith.
He confessed to everything.
He did. To 5 murders, in fact, including Dorothy Waterstreet's murder from all those years ago.
So wait, he just came out and admitted it. Why?
That's where things get even more complicated. Because along with the confessions, Smith started talking about mental health issues.
Mental life issues. Like what?
He claimed to have multiple personality disorder. And get this, he even said he was being controlled by the spirit of his dead brother.
Wow. Okay. There's a whole other level. So were they legitimate claims?
The psychological evaluations did point to some potential issues, maybe stemming from childhood trauma, his strict religious upbringing, things like that.
So his lawyers, they saw an opening, right?
They did. They went for an insanity plea, hoping to avoid the harshest punishment.
Arguing that he wasn't really in control of his actions. Did it work?
It didn't. The prosecution argued that his crimes were premeditated, that he knew what he was doing. The jury, they sided with the prosecution.
So back to prison he goes.
Yeah.
End of story.
Oh, not even close. This is Lemuel Smith we're talking about. Prison, it wasn't the end for him. It was just the start of a whole new chapter, a chapter that's even more shocking than the last.
Oh, man. This is where we get to the murder of Donna Payant.
Inside a maximum security prison. A story that really makes you question everything you think you know about security, about the justice system, about human nature itself.
Yeah, this is heavy stuff. I'm almost afraid to ask, but how? How did he do it?
That's the question that rocked the nation. And that's what we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive. How a man already behind bars for some of the most horrific crimes imaginable was able to commit an act that changed the whole landscape of prison security forever.
All right, so we're back. And, after everything we've talked about, I got to admit, I'm kind of dreading this last part. We've got Lemuel Smith, a serial killer, already in prison. And now we're talking about how he managed to kill a corrections officer inside a maximum security facility. I mean, how does that even happen?
It was a complete and utter breakdown of security, a failure at so many levels. And for Donna Payne's family, for her colleagues, it was a devastating loss. It really exposed the hidden dangers that corrections officers face every day.
So 1981, Smith's at Green Haven Correctional Facility, one of the toughest prisons in New York. Donna Payant, she's an officer there, and she goes missing during her shift. I can't imagine the chaos that must have ensued.
It was a frantic search, everyone hoping for the best, but fearing the worst. And tragically, their worst fears were confirmed. They found her body mutilated in a garbage dump outside the prison.
And knowing Smith's history, I mean, he had to be the prime suspect right away.
Oh, absolutely. He was already known for his brutality, and the fact that this happened inside a maximum security prison, well, all signs pointed to him, but of course they still needed evidence.
What kind of evidence did they find?
Well, you're probably not going to believe this, but bite marks played a crucial role again.
No way. Seriously, bite marks again.
Yep. The same forensic odontologist who connected Smith to the other murders, he was called in. And just like before, the bite marks on Payne's body, they matched Smith's dental records. It was like a terrifying echo of his past.
Okay, so they had their man, but this time, no insanity plea, right? He's already serving life sentences. What more could they even do to him?
Well, the Payant case, it was unique. It triggered this specific law in New York at the time. If you murdered a peace officer while you were already incarcerated, it was an automatic death penalty.
Wow, so Lemuel Smith actually ended up on death row.
He did. But the story doesn't end there. Smith's lawyers, they were big names, William Kunstler and C. Vernon Mason, they decided to challenge the law itself. They argued that the mandatory death penalty in this case was unconstitutional.
Going after the law itself, that's a bold strategy. Did it work?
It did. In 1984, Smith's death sentence was commuted to life in prison. The court said that, there needed to be room for other factors to be considered.
I can't even imagine how Payant's family must have felt about that.
Yeah.
But even though he didn't get a death penalty, there had to be some kind of consequence.
Oh, there was. They put Smith in solitary confinement.
Solitary? For how long?
Decades. Over 20 years. He was in near total isolation, the longest period of solitary confinement in the nation at the time.
Decades? That's hard to even comprehend.
It is. It raises all sorts of ethical questions about punishment, about the balance between justice and cruelty.
Yeah, no easy answers there. But it does feel fitting, in a way, that someone who caused so much pain and isolation ended up facing that himself. So where's he now?
As of December 2022, he's still incarcerated at Wen Correctional Facility, another maximum security prison in New York. He'll likely spend the rest of his days there, a ghost haunting the halls of the prison system.
It's a bleak ending to a really disturbing story.
Mm.
So I guess, what do we take away from all of this?
I think the biggest question that lingers is, nature versus nurture. Was Lemuel Smith born evil? Or was he made that way by the circumstances of his life?
That's the real deep dive, isn't it? The stuff we're left pondering long after the story's over.
It is. And I think the most important thing is to keep asking those questions, to keep searching for answers, for ways to understand and hopefully prevent these kinds of tragedies from happening again.
To keep having these tough conversations.
Exactly. So thank you for joining us on this journey into the dark heart of the Lemuel Smith case. It's been heavy, but it's been important.
It has, and we hope it's given you something to think about, something to maybe even spark some conversations of your own.
Keep those minds open, keep those conversations going, and remember, there's always more to learn.
Thanks for diving deep with us.